All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking the brilliant but honestly deeply tragic story of Friedrich Nietzsche. We're going to look at the fascinating mechanics behind a mind that sought to literally conquer human limitation, only to completely lose itself in the process. It's a story about the ultimate pursuit of greatness, turning human suffering into power, and the absolute terrifying risks of digging way too deeply into your own reality. Let's get into it.
To truly grasp this whole narrative, we actually have to start right at the shocking end of this genius's life and work our way backward. Section 1. The madness in the Alps. Picture this striking scene, right? A man completely isolated high up in the freezing, remote elevations of the Swiss Alps. He spends his days doing almost nothing else but relentlessly walking and thinking. Now, this isn't just some casual afternoon stroll. This is the physical manifestation of an intense, all-consuming intellectual pursuit. He's up there, physically above the rest of humanity, trying to untangle some of the absolute most complex philosophical challenges ever conceived. It's the ultimate image of the solitary genius at work. But here's the wild part. This intense intellectual journey, it doesn't end in triumph. It ends with a stark, totally absurd image of this exact same man down in the streets, hugging a horse in a fit of complete and total madness. Just take a second to process that extreme contrast. We go from the towering heights of brilliant solitary contemplation in the Alps to a devastating public collapse into total mental unraveling. So how does a mind go from pursuing absolute human potential to just completely shattering? Well, to answer that, we have to figure out what exactly he was thinking up on that mountain that pushed him right over the edge. Section 2. Loosening the world's bolts. So Nietzsche's absolute primary goal was to loosen the bolts of absolutely everything the world held as undeniable truth. Imagine the structural foundations of society, or morality, or shared reality itself as these tightly fastened bolts keeping everything stable and predictable. Nietzsche's project wasn't just to, slap a fresh coat of paint over the structure. No, he was actively taking a massive wrench to those bolts. He wanted to dismantle what the world holds certain, to literally shake the very foundations of human belief. And this desire to dismantle reality, it wasn't just random chaos. It was powered by a very specific intellectual engine. Section 3, the will to power. The absolute core drive behind all of his work was a concept he famously called the will to power. Now, to be clear, this wasn't just some basic desire for political control or physical dominance. It was much deeper. It was a foundational driving energy, a force pushing to assert itself, to overcome massive obstacles, and to reshape reality entirely according to its own subjective vision. When he was up in those freezing mountains loosening the world's bolts, it was this exact will to power that was turning the wrench. Okay, so let's see how this all builds into something super practical that you can actually apply to your own daily struggles. Section 4. Alchemy of the Spirit. He developed this really profound formula for resilience, and it kicks off with Step 1, suffering. But here's the twist. Rather than running away from the pain, the formula moves right into Step 2, the alchemy of the spirit. And that directly results in Step 3, growth. This right here is the absolute beating heart of his philosophy's practical value. Nietzsche didn't believe in evading hardship, not at all. Instead, he proposed this alchemy of the spirit that directly transmutes our deepest suffering into profound personal growth. Think about it like historical alchemists trying to turn base lead into pure gold. Nietzsche believed that your psychological pain, your hardship, your fear, those were the raw, heavy materials required to forge a much stronger, vastly more elevated version of yourself. Now, this alchemy sounds incredibly empowering, right? But remember, it was meant to build toward a theoretical masterpiece that carried immense psychological danger. Section 5. Cost of subjective greatness. You see, he dreamt of creating the Overman, which you might know as the Superman myth. This was his grand vision of an ultimate, totally fearless end state. It represented a person who has perfectly utilized that alchemy of the spirit to overcome absolutely every single fear and every human limitation. The Overman is someone who has loosened all the world's bolts, completely rejected traditional certainties, and rebuilt their own completely subjective reality entirely from the ground up, driven completely by their own will to power. Sounds epic, doesn't it? But wait, because there is a super stark warning here. This is fundamentally an unattainable end goal. Relentlessly pursuing an absolute, fearless perfection like that extracts a massive, devastating toll on the human psyche. The real danger is that the Overman just isn't a realistic psychological destination. When a human being tries to literally transcend their own humanity, shedding every single fear and certainty that anchors them to the shared reality of the world, they're stepping into incredibly, unbelievably dangerous psychological territory.
And that brings us to his tragic cautionary tale, the terrifying risk of a brilliant mind digging so incredibly deep into its own subjective depths is that it becomes completely stuck on its way back out. And honestly, this totally explains that shocking transition we talked about at the very beginning of this explainer. From relentlessly walking and thinking in the Alps to hugging a horse in the streets in total madness. In his nonstop quest to dismantle absolute truths and forge his very own internal subjective universe, his mind simply couldn't find its way back to our shared reality. The alchemy essentially worked too well. It totally dissolved the bolts that held his own sanity together. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with this final thought. Where exactly is the line between the healthy alchemy of transmuting our suffering into personal growth and the profound danger of chasing a totally unattainable end goal of absolute fearlessness? Nietzsche's brilliant yet shattered mind serves as this incredible roadmap for human resilience, but it's also a glaring, flashing warning sign right at the edge of the psychological abyss. How do we strive for true greatness without loosening the very bolts that keep us grounded in reality? Think about that as you go about your week.